Hey everybody, welcome back. My name is Elise, and this is 10 to Life, where we are talking all things true crime. So if you're brand new, stopping by for the first time, welcome, and I hope you enjoy today's case video. And for everybody who is a returning 10 to Lifer, welcome back. Now before we jump into the video, I gotta say it, if you want to support the channel, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button if you haven't, share the link somewhere, do your thing, support the channel. Today's case that we're talking about is one that is, what's that show I'm trying to think of? Snapped on Oxygen. Is that the right show? Where it's like a love triangle gone wrong or a romantic relationship that just reaches a boiling point. Well, today, the case that we're talking about is a love triangle gone horribly, horribly wrong, and still a huge question mark at the end of it. Not only what the real story is, but what's happening right now, because it is ongoing. It is literally in the news, still ongoing, a huge mystery, hasn't been solved, lots and lots to talk about here. Moriah Wilson is a 25-year-old accomplished athlete, touted as the winningest woman and had everything in her life going for her. Her mother, Karen Wilson, is a cycling instructor. Her father, Eric Wilson, was on the 1977 U.S. ski team from Burke Mountain Academy. Just a family of athletes. Moriah also attended Burke, the same academy as her father, where he was actually a ski coach at the time that she was there. She and her brother took up the family baton and became accomplished skiers themselves, just a huge family of athletes. And the intensely driven Moriah was not only a Division I skier, but also the captain of her soccer team, and more recently, an amazing gravel racer. It wasn't long that she was actually on the gravel racing scene and that she began to really make a name for herself, competitively racing and winning at an astounding rate in a relatively short amount of time in this sport. But a sport that once brought her extreme joy, confidence, and praise ultimately led her down the path of an untimely death. So how could something that was so great and seemed so promising lead this woman down such a dark path that her entire life would turn upside down? So guys, let's get right into it.
10 to Life with Elise starts right now.
Moriah decided in 2019, after graduating from Dartmouth with an engineering degree, that she wanted to pursue professional racing as a cyclist. In just 2 short years, she was working her way up the ladder, sharing the podium with established leaders in the sport, and really just doing incredibly well. She even ended up quitting her job and turning to cycling full-time. She found sponsors and made lots of friends through this new cycling community. And by being completely immersed in this new community, it led her to meet a man by the name of Colin Strickland. And Colin is 35 years old and was another accomplished cyclist who happened to share a sponsor with Moriah. In October of 2021, Moriah was visiting Austin, Texas, where Colin also lives, and they started a very brief relationship, both freshly out of these previous relationships that they had been in. And this relationship was very short-lived, however, and only lasted until the beginning of November of 2021, so really just a few weeks. After that, Moriah returned home to California, and then the following month, in December, Colin ended up rekindling his 3-year live-in relationship with a woman by the name of Kaitlin Armstrong, who is a 34-year-old yoga instructor. Colin and Moriah still were friendly and in this same community together, so they did continue having a friendship and a platonic relationship after he and Kaitlin had rekindled. Unfortunately, this would ultimately spell disaster for Moriah. Because Kaitlin wasn't a fan of their friendship between Colin and Moriah, not at all. She didn't understand how they were so close or why they were so close, as she also had no idea that they were once romantically involved. And it was so uncomfortable for her that it got to the point where she actually was blocking calls and text messages that were coming in from Moriah to Colin's phone. And this eventually led Colin to actually hiding Moriah's phone number under a different name on his phone. Now let me just say, if you're hiding names in your phones, if you are trying to disguise who you're talking to, putting it under a male name or a female name or a business name or whatever you're doing, it's sketchy. It's a lot of red flags. So Colin, it's time to beat it. Either just own it and put your foot down and say, this is my friend, you got to accept it. Or if Kaitlin means a lot to you and it's bothering her and upsetting her, it's time to cut ties. But by doing this like shady programming of the name, I can't get on board with that. So this year, in January of 2022, at a cycling event in Arkansas, Moriah and Kaitlin came face to face. And this was extremely uncomfortable because Moriah, just 25 years old, Kaitlin, almost 10 years older than her. There was also this weird dynamic and energy because of Colin, so it just was not good. And following that event, Moriah texted Colin saying, "This weekend was strange for me, and I just want to know what's going on. If you just want to be friends, which it seems like that's the case, then that's totally cool, but I'd like to talk about it because honestly, my mind has just been going in circles and I don't know what to think." Now, this text message to me does not seem like they were quite platonic. Were they really just platonic friends, as Colin had been saying to Kaitlin this whole time since rekindling? Or were they still ongoing? Was he trying to have his cake and eat it too, leading both of these women on because they lived in different areas? And it's unclear if it was on that trip itself or not, but in January, Kaitlin learned of the romance that had happened during she and Colin's brief break in their relationship just a few months prior. And according to friends, Kaitlin was extremely enraged when she found out. So much so that she was physically shaking with anger. And she also told her friend that she wanted to kill Moriah. So now it was all becoming clear. She was now understanding why they were so close, why Colin wouldn't just drop her as a friend, why she had to block the calls, because it was romantic. At one point, maybe not anymore, but that's what the deeper connection was between the two of them. It wasn't as though Kaitlin felt she was overreacting and going crazy, as so many men will often gaslight women into thinking, but now there was a root that she could identify. They had been together romantically. They were still talking. He said they were platonic. Moriah said they weren't. This is getting very, very messy. Now, as Kaitlin is coming to terms with all of this new information she learned, and as she's kind of, getting her arms around it, a few months pass. And on May 10th, Moriah arrived back in Austin, Texas to participate in a race called Gravel Locos, and she was staying with a friend while she was in town. But remember, this is where Colin lives and also where Kaitlin lives. On the night of May 11th, Colin made plans with Moriah to go swimming together after 5:30 p.m., still hanging out with her despite Kaitlin clearly not being okay with it, and now having known the truth about their relationship for over 6 months now. But being the dirty dog, in my opinion, that Colin is, he lied to Kaitlin about what his plans were that night. Because surely he wasn't going to selfishly cut Moriah off. He still wanted her in his life, regardless of how his partner of 3 years felt about it. Colin picked up Moriah at the friend's house where she was staying on his motorcycle, and the two of them ate dinner together at a place called Pool Burger after swimming at Deep Eddy Pool. After they ate, Colin dropped Moriah off back at the friend's house where she was staying before her next race. But when he dropped her off, Colin didn't wait to see if Moriah got in safely and just assumed that she had. He also then texted Kaitlin at 8:36 p.m. that he had been dropping flowers off at a friend's house and his phone had died, but he was now on his way home. So after he left, which was 1 minute after Moriah arrived home, a 2012 black Jeep Grand Cherokee with a bike rack, the same model as Caitlin's vehicle, drove by the house and was captured by a neighboring security camera. Moriah entered the home of her friend at the exact same time that Colin sent that text to Kaitlin. And this was confirmed by the personalized code that was given to Moriah for the smart lock on her friend's house to get inside. It's believed that Kaitlin may have been tracking Colin's location using an app called Strava that tracks cyclists and runners' paths and wasn't at all fooled by Colin's attempt to cover up his location and what he was doing that night. It's also suspected that she may have followed Moriah's recently downloaded Strava ride, which had started earlier that day at the friend's house, to track her whereabouts as well. Later that evening, the friend that Moriah had been staying with called 911 to report that Moriah was on the floor of the bathroom, unconscious and bleeding from several gunshot wounds to her torso. First responders responded to the home at the 1700 block of Maple and attempted to perform CPR. However, it was too late, and Moriah, just 25 years old, was pronounced dead. Her brilliant life had been senselessly snuffed out in a jealous rage. Moriah's bike was also missing from the scene and was quickly found nearby in a thick area of bamboo, and it appeared to have been possibly staged to make this crime look more like a robbery rather than a murder. A day later, on May 12th, police found that Kaitlin had an outstanding Class B warrant out for her. This was for an arrest on an unrelated larceny charge that she had. She had apparently skipped out on a Botox procedure back in 2018, giving them her credit card and then claiming that she had another one that she would rather use that was in her car, so she left the scene without paying, and the total was about $650, which at that point, it's just kind of like, girl, skip the Botox. If you can't afford it, you probably don't need it anyway. Just like, why are you trying to risk a larceny charge and for Botox? Whatever. Okay, to each their own. So Kaitlin was apprehended and brought to the Austin Police Department Homicide Unit, and she was asked what had happened in the past 24 hours. When she was questioned about the death of Moriah, Kaitlin suddenly became very still and unresponsive. She was reportedly confronted with video evidence after that car that appeared to be hers was caught on security footage around the time that Moriah was murdered. Cops observed that she failed to explain why the vehicle was in the area, despite several opportunities to explain herself. Kaitlin ended up rolling her eyes in an angry way during this interview as police then began asking about the love triangle between the three of them. And she told police, "I don't have any idea that he even saw that girl or even went out with this girl as of recently," and was getting very, very heated about this. Investigators then posed whether she was upset when trying to explain why the vehicle was in the area, and she began to nod her head in agreement. But then she asked to leave. And due to a technical error on the warrant and the database not having the correct birthday listed, she was actually free to leave.
Learning more tonight about the search for an Austin woman who's accused of murdering a professional cyclist. U.S. Marshals are looking for Kaitlin Armstrong. She's accused of killing Anna Moriah Wilson nearly 2 weeks ago here in Austin. Police say the victim had a brief relationship with the suspect's boyfriend last year.
And investigators say that made Armstrong angry. And now there's new information that could help find her. KVU's Matt Fernandez is live in East Austin with surveillance video from the night of the murder. Hi, Matt.
Hello. Yeah, U.S. Marshals are trying to find a black Jeep Grand Cherokee that was seen leaving this area where Wilson was staying. They're also trying to track down suspect Kaitlin Marie Armstrong as well. Now, Anna Moriah Wilson was well known in the cycling community. She was staying with a friend in the Austin area ahead of a race in Hico. Wilson was found unconscious in an East Austin home on May 11th. Now investigators say suspect wanted in the connection of her murder is Kaitlin Marie Armstrong. U.S. Marshals say she was a yoga teacher and a realtor. Police uncovered information that Wilson had previously a relationship with a man whom Armstrong was involved with, according to authorities. Now, according to an affidavit in this case, Wilson and Armstrong's boyfriend went swimming at Deep Eddy Pool the day she was killed. They then went to eat, and they dropped her off at a house on Maple Avenue where Wilson was staying. We have surveillance video that shows an SUV leaving where Wilson was staying. Authorities are now trying to find that vehicle. It's a black Jeep Grand Cherokee, and U.S. Marshals say they got about 30 tips, but really need the public's help in finding Armstrong.
We always take our investigations and we start here locally. We're going based upon the facts. And those facts, if those facts lead us outside of Austin or they lead us outside of the state of Texas, then we react. And that's the very unique thing with the Marshal Service, who was established in 1789, is all that communication has already been established. We can reach out if we get a lead to, a surrounding state.
The family of Anna Moriah Wilson issued a statement. In part, it says, "We are absolutely devastated by the loss of our beautiful daughter and sister, Anna Moriah Wilson. There are no words that can express the pain and suffering we're experiencing due to this senseless, tragic loss. Moriah was talented, kind, and a caring woman." The family also added that Wilson was not in a romantic relationship with anyone at the time of her death. U.S. Marshals say if you have any information in this case, you're asked to call law enforcement. Back to you.
All right, our Matt Fernandez live in East Austin tonight. Matt, thank you.
And she seems to have worked very quickly after that. She booked a flight from Texas to New York, she deactivated her social media, and she completely disappeared. When investigators reviewed the surveillance footage, they saw that Kaitlin arrived at the Austin International Airport on May 14th around 12:30 p.m., where she boarded a flight to Houston and then later boarded a connecting Southwest flight to New York at LaGuardia Airport, almost as if she was trying to skip around on all of these little flights to confuse people or to somehow lose her track somehow.
Police say Armstrong flew to New York's LaGuardia Airport 3 days after the murder. Investigators believe she was dropped off at the Newark airport on May 18th, which was one day after Austin police got a warrant for her arrest. But police haven't found any reservations under Armstrong's name. U.S. Marshals are avidly looking for any information on this murder. Meanwhile, Wilson's loss continues to be felt in the bicycling community.
So 5 days after her initial interview, a homicide warrant for Kaitlin was issued by the U.S. Marshals. But at this point, she was already in the wind. Shortly after her arrival in New York, an ID was issued under the name of Kaitlin's sister, Christine Armstrong. And it seems extremely suspicious that her sister, whose last known address was in California, would now suddenly apply for a New York ID on May 17th, the same day that that warrant was issued for Kaitlin's arrest, and only shortly after she happened to flee Texas to New York. Not a real thought-out mastermind plan, in my opinion, because this is something that the government can track and that officials can trace. On May 19th, just 2 days later after getting her new ID and after this warrant was issued, she was charged with first-degree murder.
Today, Austin police issued a murder warrant for a local cyclist.
Investigators say Kaitlin Marie Armstrong shot and killed professional cyclist Anna Moriah, or Mo Wilson. The motive? An apparent love triangle. Now, that shooting happened last Wednesday in a home on Maple Avenue in East Austin. 25-year-old Wilson was staying with a friend ahead of a race in Hicko, Texas, which is northwest of Waco. Just before 10 p.m., police got a call from Wilson's friend saying she found Wilson shot. She died at that home.
Investigators say 35-year-old Kaitlin Marie Armstrong murdered Wilson. Police say back in October of last year, Armstrong split up with her longtime boyfriend, another professional cyclist, Colin Strickland, and that Strickland became involved in a relationship with Wilson, only to later get back together with Armstrong. According to police, a tipster told detectives that Armstrong found out about that relationship back in January of this year and, quote, became furious and was shaking in anger, end quote. The tipster also told police that Armstrong had mentioned that she wanted to kill Wilson.
Now, Wilson and Strickland remained friends. At around 6 p.m. on the day Wilson was killed, she went swimming with Strickland at Deep Eddy Pool. At around 8:30, police say Strickland dropped Wilson off at that home in East Austin. Surveillance video from a neighboring home shows an SUV stopping at the home next to the home Wilson was staying in 1 minute later. And Wilson was found shot just before 10 p.m. Now, while investigating Wilson and Strickland's relationship, investigators went to Strickland and Armstrong's home, where they found an SUV matching the one in the surveillance video.
Police went on to say that Armstrong has now deleted her social media accounts and was last seen by her boyfriend on May 13th. They believe at this point she may have fled the country.
A private investigator echoed the same suspicion that the police had, that Kaitlin was now living under her sister Christine's identity, which would probably fly under the radar for a little bit because they shared a strikingly similar resemblance. The address listed on the ID was that of Camp Haven. It's a campground in Livingston Manor, New York. Now fast forward almost a month, because on June 15th, there were reports that Kaitlin had been spotted at Camp Haven at that campground in New York a month prior, which is right around the same time that she first arrived in New York. According to an anonymous camper, Caitlin's sister Christine works at the camp and had been a resident there as well too. The camper also stated that Christine had been interviewed by U.S. Marshals, who confirmed that the camp location was part of their manhunt, a manhunt in which still has not resulted in Kaitlin being found. They have now closed the campground and put up a no trespassing sign.
Did fugitive murder suspect Kaitlin Armstrong hide out in this remote campground? The striking yoga instructor is wanted in connection with the shooting death of professional cyclist Moriah Wilson, who once had a relationship with Armstrong's boyfriend, cyclist Colin Strickland. Armstrong flew from Austin to New York on May 14th after being questioned by police. Security cameras captured her casually strolling through LaGuardia Airport, yoga mat in tow. She was next seen 4 days later on May 18th at another New York regional airport, Newark International. Now the big question is, did Kaitlin Armstrong spend those missing 4 days here at Camp Haven? It's in the Catskill Mountains north of New York City, and a camper who stayed here around that time says he saw the fugitive camping out with her sister. We asked whether Armstrong had ever stayed here, but a Camp Haven employee had no comment. There is so much interest here at Camp Haven. You could see right behind me, look at this. They're actually putting up a no trespassing sign. The campground is owned by a wellness company, also called Haven. The camp website describes it as entirely off the grid. And look who runs their communications, Armstrong's sister, Christy Armstrong.
Hi, beautiful humans.
Christy dances and posts motivational talks on social media.
If you're getting to a place where you're fed up with your life right now, good. Nobody changes their life when it's going super well.
The Armstrong sisters share a strong family resemblance. I spoke to Fox Nation's Nancy Grace, who is covering the case. Nancy, do you think she could now be impersonating her sister?
I think there's a very strong chance that she is impersonating her sister and traveling with one of her IDs. That does not mean the sister, Christine, is complicit.
Former U.S. Marshal Lenny DePaul says if Armstrong was hiding out at the campsite, she's long gone by now.
She could have jumped on another flight under a different name. She could be out of the country. She could be in Canada, Mexico, who knows? But they're covering their bases. The appropriate lookouts are in place around the world. It's going to be tough for her to hide.
And Camp Haven has been contacted by media but has yet to issue any response, only stating that Christine did indeed work there, but did not elaborate any further. Christine has also not commented publicly about the murder or her sister and her sister's possible whereabouts. Colin has publicly expressed remorse for the close ties that he has to the case, but he reportedly has also gone underground, according to a friend, because he's scared that Kaitlin may choose to try to find him and kill him as well. He also spoke out and said that he had ended the relationship with Kaitlin, as a matter of fact, and that it was just interesting because timing happened to work out that Moriah was coming to Austin to visit a friend that exact same week that they ended their relationship. And Colin says in this interview, it was completely unplanned, and we started spending some time together, yeah, and that was clearly expressed to Kaitlin at that time, and Kaitlin even dated other men directly after that. Colin went on to explain that they were going their separate ways, but just didn't get enough inertia to actually separate, since they were involved in several businesses together, including a present business that they shared in which they renovate vintage trailers. So was this the case? Did he and Kaitlin really break up before Moriah came to Austin, and Kaitlin was dating other people too, and it just happened to work out for timing that Moriah was in Austin? But if that's the case, then why would Kaitlin react the way she allegedly did? I don't know. To me, it just doesn't really smell right. Colin also told investigators that Kaitlin is one of the least volatile people that he's ever met, and that's why this is just absolutely shocking to him, saying that she must have had sides to her personality that she did not share with anybody.
And now we're going to turn to the Texas yoga instructor wanted for murder. Her father is now speaking out, and our chief national correspondent, Matt Gutman, joins us from Austin with that. Good morning, Matt.
Hey, good morning, Michael. I spoke to that father last night. Mike Armstrong is shattered. He said his daughter is not capable of committing the crime she's accused of, murdering a love rival in a fit of jealous rage. But there is one thing that he and authorities agree upon at this point. There are a lot of unanswered questions here.
We love you, Katie, and we are going to figure this out.
This morning, the father of missing murder suspect Kaitlin Armstrong speaking exclusively with ABC News.
I know her, and I know how she thinks, and I know what she believes, and that I know that she just would not do something like this. I know her. I know her.
He says his daughter is not capable of committing the crime she's charged with, shooting her alleged romantic rival, rising cycling star Moriah Wilson.
That is what they believe. I know that she did not do this. There are a lot of unanswered questions.
According to court documents, the day after Wilson's murder, police questioned Armstrong, confronting her with this surveillance video showing a dark SUV matching her vehicle driving away from the home where Wilson was found with a deadly gunshot wound.
Now, that's the camera that captured that Jeep Grand Cherokee driving up this alley. Minutes later, those shots were fired. Wilson was killed. But What's surprising is that none of the neighbors here said they heard anything.
When detectives told Armstrong the video made things not look too good, they wrote in the report she nodded her head up and down as if in agreement. That's when investigators say she asked to end the interview and was allowed to leave. By the next morning, Armstrong's social media accounts were reportedly wiped clean, according to the arrest affidavit, and she vanished. The U.S. Marshals joining the urgent search for her and say she may still be in the Austin area.
She was a realtor. She was a yoga teacher. So she had personal relationships here in the Austin area. We hope that eventually, if she had some type of plan, that maybe she would reach out to those associates and we would receive a tip based upon that.
Now, Mike Armstrong said he last spoke to his daughter about 5 days ago. He knew where she was then. Now, the U.S. Marshals say they have about 3 to 10 agents working on this at any given time. They say the key is finding that Jeep Grand Cherokee. Guys.
All right, Matt.
But ballistic evidence linked to the murder weapon that was used on Moriah was linked to a 9mm handgun that was purchased by Colin for Kaitlin back in January as a gift. And the gun was found in the home that the couple shared. So, rewind a little bit to when Kaitlin first fled to New York. On May 18th, Kaitlin was seen on security footage in New Jersey at Newark International Airport being dropped off, only a day after her sister was issued that New York ID, where then U.S. Marshals say they lost track of her and were unable to find a flight under her name. There also is some speculation that maybe she used her appearance at Newark Airport to throw detectives off her trail, and may have just ended up driving or returning back by bus or wherever back to New York. Even more difficult, she might have actually crossed over the border to hide in Canada and didn't catch any flight and was just using Newark as a point to be seen on footage and throw everybody off of her tracks. Investigators are unsure, though, how Kaitlin arrived at Newark Airport and how she departed from it, but they suggest that she must have had help. U.S. Marshals have now upgraded the case to major case status and are offering a $5,000 reward for any information leading to the arrest of Kaitlin. She's considered armed and dangerous, and they're asking that if anybody has any tips to please contact the U.S. Marshals Office. So as I mentioned, this is still an ongoing case. Kaitlin has not been found. Nobody knows where she is. She is essentially just in the wind. Moriah and her family still have no justice, no closure. And I still have a lot of questions. The timeline of everything that Colin is saying and the reaction of Kaitlin, I don't know, it does not sit right with me. Not only from that January meeting in which Moriah and Kaitlin came face to face, and then Moriah was sending those text messages asking Colin, so do you just want to be friends? That's kind of what it seems like, as though they weren't already just friends, even though that's what he was telling Kaitlin. Then Moriah happens to come to Austin 6 months later. They hang out. He lies about it. He also programs her number under somebody else's name. Yet he also then tells investigators that, no, Kaitlin and I actually broke up, and she knew that I was hanging out with Moriah, and she was dating other men too, which if that's the case, then why would you lie to Kaitlin that night saying you were delivering flowers when you weren't, if you were broken up, and if she knew that? Like, a lot of information here to where, and I don't want to speculate too much, but it seems as if Colin is not wanting to take a lot of accountability for playing both girls at the same time and being, perhaps the catalyst as to why this happened and why Kaitlin flew into a jealous rage and decided to kill Moriah over it. Not saying it's his fault directly, it's obviously Caitlin's fault, but still, I think his stories are starting to not line up because I don't think he wants to take accountability that he could have been the reason this all happened, which he was, in my opinion, the reason this all happened. And maybe he's trying to indirectly gaslight Kaitlin as the crazy, deranged ex-girlfriend who was in a jealous rage and killed Moriah even though they were broken up, which very well may be true. It certainly may be. But everything we know about him lying to Kaitlin that same day about what he was doing, saying he was then returning home, hiding Moriah's name under a different name or the phone number under a different name in his phone, like all of these things make me think that it's much more likely that he had this long-term relationship with Kaitlin that he did not want to end because it would be inconvenient since they were in business together, had multiple businesses together. Perhaps he did still love her. He didn't want to let that go. But at the same time, he was infatuated with this new person, 25 years old, Moriah, who lived in California and who he was excited by. And so I believe he probably just wanted to juggle the two. And then he started to get caught up in January on this. He changed her name in his phone, hid things from Kaitlin. Then Moriah comes back into town. He's hiding things again. Seems to me more like Colin was trying to, have his cake and eat it too and do some shady stuff. Kaitlin sniffed it out. She got pissed. She used that weapon that he got for her as a gift, and she went and attacked what she viewed as what was the problem between she and Colin living happily ever after. Moriah was the issue, standing in the way, so she felt it was her duty to get rid of her. Again, this is just my opinion on everything. And then she fled, and now she's in the wind. I'm curious to know what you think about this case. Do you think that that's more likely the situation and the reality here? Or do you think that Kaitlin just flew off the handle, even though they had already broken up and she was dating other men apparently, and still decided to kill Moriah in a jealous rage? And where do you think that Kaitlin is? Do you think she's in Canada? Do you think she's hiding out in New York because the population is so dense there that she could probably fly under the radar a little bit? And because you really can use cash for anything there, speaking as a former New York resident, you can use cash for rent, you can use cash for everything. So maybe she's not going to be tracked through credit cards. I don't know. I'm curious to know what you guys think. But as I mentioned, she has still not been found. So please, the U.S. Marshals are looking for information and for any tips. So if you can share this link anywhere, social media, text messages, group chats, wherever it's at, do that. Because if tips can come in and if they can find and apprehend Kaitlin, then Moriah's family can hopefully get answers as to why this happened and what happened, and then get some sort of semblance of closure, put Moriah to rest, and she will ultimately then hopefully get some justice. Because right now, there's just a ton of loose ends and a ton of question marks still, and nobody is able to actually, button this up in any type of way to where people can begin to even try to move forward. So that is my long-winded way of saying, share this link, please, because it's going to help get more eyes on it, and people who have maybe come into contact with Kaitlin or know her habits, maybe they will share some anonymous tips with the U.S. Marshals. All right, guys, I'm going to follow it closely, and I'm going to keep you updated, and I'm going to let you know what we learn, and if I can get some more information from Colin's friends. If you're watching this, any of Colin's friends, slide into my messages, slide into my DMs, slide into my emails. Let me know what the truth was here with this dynamic and relationship. And I'm going to keep you guys updated as soon as I learn more of those details and as we learn more information about where Kaitlin may be. And we're just going to follow this case closely and follow this active manhunt together. Thanks for tuning in, and subscribe if you haven't done so already. Please don't forget to like this video on your way out, and definitely leave your comments below with what you think about this case. I am very curious to know your thoughts. All right, guys, thanks for tuning in, and until the next case, stay safe.